Just in case this one disappears off of the internet, this is from July 2021. It's from the notsapc.nhs, that's the National Health Service for those of you outside the UK, .uk. And it's about the COVID-19 vaccine. It's very, very clear here that they knew about a lot of the side effects. They knew about myocarditis and pericarditis. They also knew about the thrombosis, and they also knew about the shingles. So very clearly laid out. It's a Q&A document. So it's just so we can see it all here, because these things have a habit of disappearing. There was one line, actually, if it wasn't so serious, it was absolutely hilarious. It's saying having somebody about having symptoms, contraindications. It says if the patient is seriously debilitated, still under active investigation, or has evidence of recent deterioration, deterral of vaccination may be considered to avoid incorrect attribution of any change in the person's underlying condition to the vaccine. So just to be clear, this is the time, this is 2021, July 2021, when everywhere you looked, every television briefing, every radio advert, safe and effective, safe and effective, safe and effective. So if it's safe and effective, why would you not vaccinate someone who is in need of this wonder drug vaccine? No, they're saying don't do it, because what they want to do is avoid anything being linked back to the vaccine. How hideous is that? I mean, Jesus. If it's that safe and effective, it shouldn't really make any difference, should it? But, so they're talking here about the various side effects if people are presenting. So we know that Lisa Shaw was one of the very, very early cases. I thought for sure when that went to court and there was an open coroner's report with the thrombosis, blood clots of the brain, etc., that they would, of course, not be mandating it and would be much more careful in who should be taking this vaccine. But that, of course, did not happen. And there was the blanket mandate that went ahead. But it's a very interesting document. So have a read of it, make of it what you will, but I think it is pretty shocking. They also know about they talked about the myocarditis and the pericarditis in the under 25s from the Pfizer vaccine. Again, remember 2021. I didn't see anything about that on any of the briefings. What I did see is people who asked about it or mentioned it were booted off of social media. So that was the only thing I saw. And then what I noticed on TV is that there was suddenly a raft of adverts for sudden onset shingles and sudden heart attacks in children. And there was one particular TV advert where there's a young girl wearing a white football kit. She collapses right in, like real close up to camera, and just boom, goes down like a ton of bricks. And they're talking about, childhood and heart attacks in young people. So those television adverts, which were pretty much on road every single break, one or both of those adverts would be on. And I said at the time, oh gosh, it looks like they're trying to normalize the side effects that I'd read in that document in 2020. Because myocarditis, pericarditis, shingles, Guillain-Barré, thrombosis, you name it, it was a massive list. All of the things that were on that list suddenly started to become television adverts. And I started to see these things being talked about on TV, normalizing them so that when they did spike and the incidence of them exploded, people would go, oh, well, yeah, they said that, sudden onset shingles is back. So look at this. And remember, we're talking about 2021 here. So this says, where I'm looking here is this paragraph in the sort of almost at the middle. Recently, a number of cases of myocarditis and pericarditis have been reported after Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine from Israel and the USA. The reported rate appears to be the highest in those under 25 years of age and in males after the second dose. Onset is within 3 days, So they knew that 2 or more doses were proving dangerous potentially to males under 25, yet males under 25 were being mandated to have vaccine after vaccine after vaccine. And then when people like myself were saying, oh, hold on a minute, there seems to be a high number of sportsmen collapsing on the field. And it started a lot with football, but we saw the same in basketball, American football, tennis, table tennis, badminton. I believe Tom Daley's swimming coach died in a swimming pool. You know, there were all of these raft of things that were happening. And if you dared actually say, hold on a minute, could these things be related? My God, the pylon and the vitriol and the name calling was off the scale. it was horrendous, absolutely horrendous. And not only was that happening personally to me and others who were speaking out like me, it was also happening globally, where you had people like Justin Trudeau, Macron, Jacinda Ardern, the New Zealand and health officials, etc., the FDA, the CDC, Anthony Fauci. All of these organizations were also vilifying people who were saying exactly what's here in this NHS, National Health Service report. So either the NHS have made this up or they got that data from somewhere. And here it says Israel and the USA. And I was really excited to see the data from Israel, because they made a really big thing about how good their tracking was. And then just before that data was due to come out, war broke out. And I'm sure those factors are completely unrelated. But what that meant is we never got to see the data from Israel. So here we go, just in case you didn't notice it, because it might be small print if you're on a device. I'm a little bit further down the page, underneath this bit here about myocarditis and pericarditis. It says, there have been some rare occurrences of patients experiencing more unusual adverse reactions, such as shingles and Bell's palsy, and these should be treated in the usual manner. Again, the adverts were flooding the TV. Sudden onset shingles in the over 50s, sudden onset shingles, sudden onset shingles, sudden onset shingles. And I saw it and I said, I saw shingles on that list of side effects in 2020. And I said to a friend, I'm going to lay money on it that they're going to start doing what they can to normalize all of these things, so that when the side effects start to appear, people already psychologically think it's normal, because the TV told them so, the media told them so. And of course, we saw the things about, heart attacks being caused by changing your duvet cover. I mean, Jesus, your gas stove, you name it, they came out with it. And here it all is in this report from July, I'm right at the top here now, July 2021. The thrombosis. Doesn't specifically say brain aneurysms, but I'm sure many of you can think of, even if it's not, just think of the celebrities. And the reason I say celebrities is because that's high profile. It's reported. For every celebrity that is reported, there's going to be thousands, tens of thousands of regular human beings who are not in the press and media that are having exactly the same thing. But just think to yourself, how many celebrities have suddenly died with heart attacks, thrombosis, or ended up in hospital with blood clots, etc. I saw 2 stories yesterday of teenagers, one of whom was a young black guy, collapsed on the field, and the county coroner said he's never seen anything like this. And I'm like, dude, you clearly haven't been looking hard enough. And then there was a second story, hot on the heels of that. A parent, her son was wearing a military uniform, and so I'm guessing he would have followed orders. And he was 18, just about to start university, and the family are shocked and devastated and heartbroken. All of this data is right here, July 2021, and even with all of this information, And they must have had it a bit before, because for somebody to put this report together, there's usually a lead time to pull all this data together. And there are various links, and they're still pushing it for pregnant women. And remember, keep in mind also that at this stage they did not have the clinical data, the clinical safety data for pregnant women. Pfizer made a big deal about announcing the test of the for pregnant women. Baller was all over it. And so at the end, they announced that. So at the end of that year that they announced it, I went and had a look for the data. So I went onto the FDA site, I went onto the CDC site. You kind of go round in the loop, but eventually end up at the clinical trial page. And I found the clinical trial number. So you can type that in and it brings you up the results. And at the end of that first year, when they should have had the results by then, because women are pregnant for 9 months, unless something goes wrong and they give birth early. But rare, I don't know of many cases where women are pregnant for 12, 18, 24 months. There was no data, so it has not been submitted. I went back 6 months later, still no data, it had not been submitted. Went back at the end of that second year, still no data, it had not been submitted. Went back the third year, and at this point now they actually gave a date and said it should be submitted on whatever the date was, 2020, November 2022, whatever it was. I went back 6 months later, still had not been submitted. But what did become clear was, rather than having several thousand women in the trials, the number had shrunk to 800 and something. I did read a report a couple of weeks ago that a high percentage of women had a miscarriage. However, I'm not going to say any more about that because I haven't seen it from an official source. It's been floating around, but trying to track it on where they should have been officially reporting it, you draw a blank. So in this document, they are advising women, pregnant women, to be vaccinated, and they do not have any clinical trial safety data. And pregnant women are traditionally precious cargo. No soft cheese, no wine, no aromatherapy oils, no this, no that, da, 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 da. The list of things is wide and varied, yet here they are knowing about thrombosis, knowing about myocarditis, knowing about pericarditis, knowing about shingles, knowing about Bell's palsy and whatever else is in here, and still here they are recommending this to pregnant women. Here we go. Pregnant women and breastfeed. Can pregnant women be vaccinated? Yes. The available data does not indicate any harm to pregnancy. What data? They didn't have any. They didn't have any data. Let that sink in for a minute. Most precious cargo on the planet, that unborn child, they didn't have any data because Pfizer had not released it. And Pfizer probably wanted to push it into that data set that they wanted to withhold for 75 years. Now, I do not have the numbers in front of me about the billions with a B, billions of dollars that were made. Pfizer's excuse for wanting to withhold the data for 75 years is because of the amount of work and time it would take to produce the data. I'm like, come on now. If you have made billions in profits, you should be able to put some of that towards hiring some staff to process the frickin' data. 75 years. Let that sink in. That's how long they wanted to withhold this data. And if any of you have been paying any attention to the usual pattern, we've just recently had the infected blood scandal here. That came at the same time as the post office scandal. There's also been the Windrush scandal. I watched the thing on Netflix a few months ago, the Sackler family, the OxyContin opioid scandal. When I was growing up, there was the thalidomide scandal, and the USA were only saved by thalidomide by one woman, Frances Kelsey. She worked for the FDA. She got the job by accident because when they saw her application, they thought she was a man, given the name. And when she turned up, they realized it was a woman. She was the lone ranger who said no to releasing thalidomide on the American public, because she said this isn't right. This is good. This is causing harms. And eventually, President John F. Kennedy gave her a special award and commendation for the work that she did. She was the FDA gatekeeper who looked at the data and said no. In the UK, they weren't quite so lucky. So when I was growing up, there were thalidomide children, and it's very visible. And one of the things that was fundamental in that is there were mothers saying, I think the drug has caused this. They were ignored. There were people in the infected blood scandal saying, hey, I think there's something wrong with this blood. They were ignored. There were a few brave doctors who stood up with the OxyContin and said, hold on a minute, this is pure opioid. This is like almost like pure heroin, etc. They were ignored. Do you see a pattern here? And the pattern then gets worse because on average, it takes about 47 years for these scandals to surface. Let's just think about some of the other sort of scandals, a little bit more salacious. Jimmy Savile here in the United Kingdom, that awful coach who was coach to Simone Biles, what he got away with, sometimes with the parents standing in the room while he had his hands all over their daughters. Jeffrey Epstein, the film director, seriously, the list is long, and these things can take decades. They usually take decades to surface, even though when I watched that Jimmy Savile documentary, there were people in the 1970s who were calling it out, and it took all of those decades later for the truth to surface. So the pattern is something isn't right. A small number of people put their head above the parapet and point it out. They are, at best, they're ignored. At worst, they are absolutely vilified. And what the Sackler family did, if you've not seen the OxyContin, it's a really good documentary, actually, and the BBC did a superb variation on it as well. What the Sackler family did is they sat around the boardroom table and they drew up a plan to blame the people who are using OxyContin and to paint them all to be out of control drug addicts. And basically they came back with the thing saying, well, it's not our fault if people are misusing our product, when in fact the product was so addictive that it was do or die. That's how callous some of this is. So please, can somebody in their right mind explain to me how our National Health Service, and clearly the American Health Service as well, because this is where they're getting the data from, America and Israel, can you tell me how these health services had this data and said nothing to the public except safe and effective, safe and effective, safe and effective, safe and effective? And if you said otherwise, goodbye to your Twitter account, goodbye to your Facebook account, goodbye to your YouTube account, if you had the audacity to at least, to even ask the question and go, oh, hold on a minute. Please explain to me how any of that is right and normal. I've been talking about this since 2020. That's how long the psychological battering has been going on. Years ago, I was like, oh, this isn't right with the footballers. I think there were a good 150 comments. It was like a rugby scrum, people piling in to tell me how stupid and reckless and irresponsible I was being for even suggesting that the vaccine might cause problems with the heart. That's how long this, because I saw the data, I saw the side effects in 2020. And I was like, okay, well, I'm sure they'll tell people about them once the drug is released. And then the drug was released and they weren't telling people about them. So I started telling people about them and was absolutely vilified, dragged across the coals, ridiculed, insulted, and all the rest of it. That didn't stop me saying it and talking about it, but I knew what it was doing to my reputation and I knew what it was doing to my livelihood. But I'm like, look, I cannot in good conscience sit here, see all this data, and say absolutely nothing about it. For me, it was basic informed consent. You should have this information so that you make an informed decision. And I think it was it 2022? It was either 2021 or early 2022. I was in London for an appointment. I went and there was a chemist, really big chemist, great big shop front windows. And it basically had a neon sign, get your vaccine here. So I thought, this is interesting. So I went in and I said, oh, can I see the vaccine insert, please? And the woman at the counter looked a bit confused. And so she sort of motioned to the pharmacist. So he came and said, oh, can I help you? And I said, oh, yes, I see you're offering the COVID vaccine. Yes. And he, big smile as though, like, oh, we got another one to stick it into. And I said, can you let me have a copy, or can I please read the vaccine insert? And he said, insert? I said, yes, with the ingredients, what's in it, and the contraindications and the side effects. And he said, oh, we don't have it here, or it's online. And at that point, I'd been searching online and I couldn't find it. I said, well, I couldn't find it online. Can you tell me whereabouts online? And he then got a little bit shady. He said, well, you just have to look for it. And then went back to doing the dispensing. So I'm like, oh my God, even if you're actively asking them for the data, they don't want it. Number one, he's saying he doesn't have it. And number two, not willing to even help you to get it. How is any of what I've said right and normal? There's a basic, I thought there was a basic premise, do no harm. And I know people get a bit antsy when you go back too far, but there was something called the Nuremberg Code when you're experimenting on people, which you're not supposed to do. And if you are going to do it, they should have given you informed consent. This was an experiment. And again, when people said it was gene therapy, oh my God, you probably seemed like you said, eat your firstborn. But now, they don't seem to be hiding the fact that actually it's not a vaccine, it was gene therapy. And the thing I was saying to people, the reason I thought it was important to have informed consent is that once something has been injected inside of you, something like this, you can't get it back out again. And there was a few things. It just stays in the injection site, then it disappears. No, it was being found in all of the major organs, the heart, the liver, the lungs. It would cross the blood-brain barrier, which again is sacred territory, the ovaries, the testes, the lymph nodes. It was being found everywhere, yet they told you on television it was only going to stay in the injection site for a few days and then, poof, it's gone. That's fundamental. And my question is, hold on a minute. If I knew that in 2020 and they didn't know, something's amiss here. Either I'm a genius or they were lying. And then it begs the question, how could you not know these fundamental things about your drug, your vaccine, and be pushing it globally if you don't even know the basics? That scenario it does not make sense to me. It does not compute with my brain. If you didn't know these things about your vaccine, what business do you have telling people it's safe and effective, safe and effective, safe and effective? And if you did know, what business did you have keeping that to yourself and not warning people? I mean, I could go on. I will not go on. I've got no idea how long this video is, but it's much longer than I planned for it to be, because all I was going to do is say, hey, let's have a look at this document, just so we've got it on screen, just in case it disappears and goes away from being online. We've got a record of it, because I was just looking at something where there was a picture of shingles on the hand, and then there was a picture of monkeypox, and the pictures were absolutely identical. So I just went to look to the original source to find the original pictures. And lo and behold, the picture on the first website had been changed. And the picture on the second website, the link no longer led to an article about shingles, because it said about shingles and it says brackets with pictures. So the link was still there saying the same thing, but it then just took you to the home page of the website with a load of just random stuff. So, and then in searching, this came up. So I thought, well, let me get a little visual record of this. And then here we are. So anyway, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. A little bit of a rant there, but my God, this is just absolutely shocking and disgusting. When you think about what they did, they decimated people's lives, they decimated people's businesses, they locked us all down for 2 years, pretended that any side effect was rare. I remember reading an article early on, not long after the Lisa Shaw case. There was a similar case with a tradesman out in Australia, where he had the vaccine and seemed okay, but his wife then noticed he wasn't sleeping well, and one night she woke up and he was really just like tossing and turning, or he was on his PC, I think he was, and she said, what's going on? And he said, I've been getting these pains in my chest and down my arm and da 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 da, and I don't, and so she says, let's just go to A&E, let's get you. How long? He said, past week or so since I had the vaccine. She says, well, let's just get you straight to the hospital. He says, oh, it's probably nothing. She says, doesn't matter, let's go. And then so he goes into the bathroom to get early hours of the morning, sort of quite late at night, early hours. And then she hears a thud, and he slumps behind the bathroom door. But with his weight on the door, she couldn't open the door to get to him. So of course she calls the ambulance, and it was too late. He died. And then she said when she checked his internet history, he'd been searching online for side effects for the vaccine, because he was like, I don't know if this is normal. I've been told it's safe and effective. I've been told there are no side effects. I've been told it just stays in the injection site and then it disappears. So for a whole week, he was having these problems, these pains, chest pains, pains down the arm, all sorts of things. He didn't say anything to his wife, and he didn't speak to a medical practitioner because he'd been told it was safe and effective. And when he was actually researching and looking online, he couldn't find any contraindication data, and so he took no action. And by the time his wife bullied him into it, it was too late. He was dead. They then tried to pass it off as COVID and all the rest of it, and she was having none of it. And she took it all the way to court, took it to the coroner, and eventually they came back and said what she already knew, that his death was due to the vaccine. But when those stories were coming out, there was one that I read, and yet another one. I think this one was someone who was he university lecturer or something like that? And they said by the time I got halfway through the article, they said the word rare 9 times. That's nearly 10 times. And there were more, but I just stopped counting at 9. That I'm a hypnotherapist. That's like hypnosis. Safe and effective, safe and effective, safe and effective, rare, 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 safe and effective, safe and effective, rare, rare, rare. That's a form of it is like a form of hypnosis. It's just shocking when you really sit back. Well, you don't even have to sit back, it's right there in your face. For some of us, it was right in our face from day one. But if you still are of the safe and effective, please tell me, how can you read this document and not at least have a few questions about how can this be? And this one here, there is no safety concerns for vaccinating individuals with a past history of COVID-19 infection. Well, I've heard very different, and that in and of itself caused some contraindications. Anyway, I'm really going to leave it there because I could talk about this all day, because I've been talking about it for the past 4 years, oftentimes largely on deaf ears and to a hostile crowd. However, I'm hoping that is going to change very, very soon as I sit here now watching them unleash the next pandemic. So thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Please feel free to share this if you feel brave enough to do so. Marilyn Devonish, the Neuro Success Coach, Rapid Transformation Specialist, and Futurist, over and out, and wishing you all very good health.